This Thursday, the 16th of October, our lesson study title is Beyond the Jordan, and we will quickly look at Psalms chapter 66 verse 6. In New King James Version it says, "He turned the sea into dry land, they went through the sea on foot, there we will rejoice in him." I repeat, "He turned the sea into dry land, they went through the sea on foot, there we will rejoice in him." That is Psalm chapter 66 verse 6, New King James Version. Both the crossing of the Red Sea and of the Jordan are markers of a new era in biblical history, and both carry symbolic significance. See the verse that we have read in Psalms chapter 66 verse 6, also Psalms 114 verse 1 to 7, and 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 6 to 15. Already in the Old Testament, there are texts that link the two crossing events and recognize a meaning, which points beyond the original settings. In Psalm 66, the psalmist celebrated God's redemptive act in his life by referring to the historical examples of the crossing of the Red Sea and of the Jordan. Psalms 114 also ties the two events together, not because the author did not see a chronological difference between them, but because of the theological significance that the two crossings share. Thus, both events are seen as contributing to a change in Israel's status, once from slavery to freedom, then from nomadic landlessness to nationhood. In these Psalms, the examples of the two crossings illustrate the changes in status of the author from oppression, poverty, helplessness, and humiliation to safety, well-being, salvation, and dignity. It is also by the Jordan that Elijah's translation takes place in the context of a similar miracle to the one recorded in Joshua. For Elijah, the crossing brought the most significant status change in his life. He was taken to heaven. For Elisha, the change is also important. The prophet's assistant, see 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 21, became the prophet of the nation. See 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 22. Read Matthew 3:16 to 17 and Mark 1:9. And then, how do these writers of the New Testament imply a symbolic spiritual meaning of the Jordan River? How do these writers of the New Testament imply a symbolic spiritual meaning of the Jordan River? So we read Matthew chapter 3 verse 16 and 17. Matthew 3:16. Yes, Matthew 3:16. Yes, we're there. 3:16 and 17. I will read in your hearing. It says, "When he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" Let me go to Mark chapter 1 verse 9. Mark chapter 1 verse 9 says, "It came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee, and was baptized by John in the Jordan." Okay. The earthly ministry of Jesus as the representative of Israel follows the pattern of the history of ancient Israel. Excuse me. Jesus undergoes the Red Sea and the Jordan experience. He is called out of Egypt after a death decree. That is Matthew 2 verse 14 to 16. Spends 40 days in the wilderness in Matthew 4 verse 2. Similar to ancient Israel's 40 years, and as a transition from his private life to his public ministry, he is baptized in the Jordan. See Matthew 3 verse 16 and 17, and Mark 1 verse 9, which we have just read. Later, in Hebrews 3 verse 3 to 4, Hebrews 3 to 4 recognizes the symbolic significance of the crossing of the Jordan and presents the entrance into Canaan as foreshadowing the rest of grace that Christians enter through faith. Amen. That marks the end of our lesson for today, the 16th of October, being a Thursday, and I shall take us back to our memory text for the week, and it's coming from the book of Joshua chapter 4 verse 23 and 24, and I read, "For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he had dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever." Amen. May we meet tomorrow, Friday, as we bring this week's lesson to a close. May the Lord keep you safe till tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good day.